All right, Rick. How many days?
Boy, 9,
Eight.
8,
Today's Wednesday.
8 days.
8 days away from the 2023 NFL Draft. This is With the First Pick, the CBS Sports NFL Draft Podcast. This is episode 39. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman, our general manager. Today, Rick, joined by our guy, our cornerback, Bryant McFadden, because we're talking about some defensive backs in this draft class. Our top 5 at safety, our top 5 at cornerback. B-Mac, two-time Super Bowl champ with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The number one cornerback coming out of high school, Rick, before he went to Florida State.
Yeah.
Balled out there.
I got to make a comment, B-Mac. I was in a lot of camps. I didn't have jerseys like yours in the background. Mine were just mesh shirts because I didn't make it out of camp. I got cut so many times. I got a lot of mesh. Should I hang up my mesh practice jerseys?
Hey, and also, too, Rick, they kind of change up the material since you've been playing as well. So even the practice jerseys are pretty decent. They're good material nowadays, you know what I mean? So they're not rocking the Russell. You probably wore Russell, didn't you?
Russell spot belt shoes. Yeah.
Spot belt shoes.
Yeah.
My jerseys look like fishnet.
Yeah. They're like the pennies that the kids wear now, like for practice. Did you have to wear your spot belt leather shoes? Did you have to wear them in the shower to break them in? Is that how you have to do it, Rick?
Yeah, no, we used to put them in. We used to wash them in the machine.
I love you caught yourself that Midwestern accent.
Just like the kickers used to do. They used to put the balls before when they were allowed to doctor the balls. I remember kickers going in and taking the game balls that they were going to kick, putting in the washing machine, then putting them in the dryer, then having a seesaw with 2 50-pound plates on each side to break in all the seams. Now you can't do that.
Wow. Yep. I remember those jerseys.
If you watch on YouTube, Debo put up a picture of Rick Spielman's jersey from the 80s. The Rick Spielman special is what Debo calls it. And if you grew up in the 80s like I did, that looks very familiar. Like the health class, the health books used to have those little short shorts with the stripes on them and the piped socks.
Oh, man. Do you guys remember the one bar? Well, the one bar coming down the middle with the little 2 bars at the bottom?
Yeah, that was to protect your nose.
Oh, that was so ugly.
That's
that
not
was
the birdcage, though.
ugly.
Like Larry. So Larry Zonka had the 2 bars, but then he had the little like hook at the top. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you can throw in the tube neck roll and then use the double tape them so you had 2.
Oh, 2. Man, look at that. That is back in the day. And you know you're a bad dude, B-Mac, if you're a cornerback or a safety wearing a neck roll.
No question. No question.
All right, so you guys know B-Mac, and if you don't, we work with him at CBS Sports HQ, and he's also the co-host of All Things Covered with a guy that Rick signed in Minnesota, Patrick Peterson, who is now with the Steelers. And by the way, Rick, do you know what number Pat P is wearing in Pittsburgh?
7.
If you look behind B-Mac there, you can see it. Number 20. He's wearing B-Mac's old number.
Oh, he is. Oh, is that a dedicated season to B-Mac?
No question. Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you. But, hey, Ryan, did you hear Rick's initial answer? He said 7. Rick, 7 is untouchable in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I know.
Well, do you know who 7 is, Rick?
Yeah, it's Roethlisberger, but I didn't know if he paid him some extra coin that those guys, B-Mac and him made a lot of coin while they were playing, and I didn't know if he was going to buy 7 this for a year or 2 or not.
I will say this: if he was wearing number 7 from the 2020 season, it would look like a little kid wearing a XXX shirt. So that's probably a good thing he went with number 20. That sure got a little stretched out by the time that career is over. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Calm down, folks. By the way, a little teaser. Talking about All Things Covered, B-Mac's podcast with Pat Peterson. They had the top cornerback in the draft class, according to our rankings, Christian Gonzalez, on the show already. They may have a few more top cornerbacks on the show before the draft, so check that out. And Rick, there's more. Stay tuned because on Monday, B-Mac will do something that Rick refuses. He will unveil his first mock draft, and you can read it on CBSSports.com. And maybe, Rick, that'll push you into doing a mock draft before the draft.
Yeah, no, but we'll have to invite him back so I can maybe take a few shots at the mock draft.
Hey, Rick, no shots will be thrown at my mock because my mock is dead on.
I tell you what.
Well, we got a lot of dollar bets. I
took time to make sure became the GM of each organization, right? And I feel like I have some unexpected trades in there as well. So I can't wait till you guys to see it, especially you, Ryan, because you've done like 1,000 mocks. I don't know. Ryan, how long does it take for you to do one mock? Because it took me about 2 days.
I did a 7-rounder that came out last Monday. That took me all day on Saturday. It was 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Now, first rounder, after you do so many, you can sort of figure out what's going to happen. You're switching things here and there. But the first few, when I started back in September, when you guys are still watching, spring ball tape, those first two take a while. And by the way, B-Mac, you can spend all the time you want. Rick is going to destroy it. He don't care. He's out here trying to hurt people's feelings.
and we
thank you for the heads up.
Yeah, we have a little side bet here all the time, and $1 bets. And so right now I'm like 30-0 against Ryan on dollar bets. But I will bet you $1 that your mock draft is under 50% correct.
I was going to say that. I'm glad you said that. So our last, so I have to do a mock draft on next Thursday. I'll be my final one of the 2023, Lord willing. So whatever our last mock draft is, this means you have to do one, Rick. Whoever gets the most right wins the 100 pennies. So are you willing to go in on that at least, Rick? You don't have to write it down. We'll do it on the show or something.
Yeah, we'll talk about it on the side. But I am putting $1 up that BMAC is under 50% in the over-under.
I mean, the correct those are not good odds in my favor, though.
You just be half right. You can't get half of them right.
I don't like those odds.
Rick, am I allowed to share a $1 bet update?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You are down $2 so far.
Yeah! Oh, you hate to see it.
The only $2 that have been settled, Rick has lost. One of them to Ryan, one of them to Pete Prisco. You lost Will Levis throw at the combine. You said no. And you also thought Jalen Hyatt would be the fastest at the combine, which wasn't even close to happening.
Well, he had a hamstring. We didn't take that into account. His hamstrings were
excuses.
Rick's had a lot of excuses. So Rick, you have committed, it sounds like, to doing a mock draft of some version. So we'll
commit. I will just say that I'm betting that BMAC is under 50% correct with his mock.
Well, I'm going to have to trick you into doing one. I'll just ask you questions about each team separately, and then we'll put them all together.
Good luck with that, Ryan.
Yeah, no, he's like trying to deal with an unruly child. Will you get more than 50% right, Rick?
Yeah, I will get 75% right.
Oh, he said 75.
No. That's not happening. 75%.
He's crazy.
No, that won't happen.
All right, so now we got to figure out a way, Debo, to get him to talk about all 31 teams so we can get a pick out of them. That's the next order of business. But for now, we got to get going because Rick's got things to do. He's going to be on Big Boy Television in a little bit. So let's talk about these rankings. Did I get everything? By the way, you can watch us live on YouTube as always. Thumbs up, please, if you're watching on YouTube. That helps us. And subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a review. And I think we are ready to go. What do you got, Debo? All right, let's get right to the rankings. Let's go. Debo said we got stuff to do. At the top, cornerback sleepers. I'll mention my guy. And Rick, I want to hear about your guys. So my guy's Corey Trice out of Purdue. Big cornerback. Ran surprisingly well, sub 4.5 during the pre-draft process. A little stiff. I think he may have to move to safety, but he offers some versatility. Probably maybe he goes late day 2, but definitely early day 3 option there. And B-Max guy is Juju Brents, the long cornerback out of Kansas State.
Can I interrupt for a second? B-Mac, it's supposed to be sleepers, guys that are not being talked about. This guy is like 7 foot long. He has a 87,000-inch wingspan, and people are talking about him because he ran fast at the combine.
Well, this was something that I did specifically for you, Rick, because I heard you were not high on Brents the entire process. Yes. And me and Ryan had a conversation about Julius during the season. And I've been high on him. And I remember Ryan got back to me when you guys started working together, traveling, looking at tape. Rick is not high on Brents. Rick doesn't like Brents for this reason. Rick doesn't like Brents for that reason. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to be on with the first pick and we're talking about sleepers, yeah, he might not be a sleeper right now. But for some people like yourself, Rick, you're still sleeping on Julius Brents. So that's why I put him as my sleeper.
He can, as long as he doesn't have to cover Quentin Johnson, then he'll be fine.
That's fair.
Whoa. The second game, he did a real good job against Johnson.
He was better, but still, Quentin Johnson went up over top of him a few times. And how can a guy 7 foot tall get the ball taken off the top of his head like Quentin Johnson did on him?
Well, to Brent's defense, if you're going to allow a few passes to be caught, at least allow them to come from the hands of a guy who's going in the first round as well.
And Rick, in your defense, you did come around on Juju over the course of the season. And,
I did.
In the pre-draft process. And give BMAC your stat that I always mess up about long cornerbacks.
Yeah, what we did in Minnesota was we did the analytics, and corners that have a wingspan that is greater than 79 inches, and his is offensive lineman wingspan. 9 out of the 10 guys have that came out with wingspan of his size led the league or were at the top of the league in PBUs.
And Rick, I'll tell you this: BMAC was on Tariq Woolen before anyone else last year too. He pointed that he was going to run fast, and he's a former wide receiver, and he obviously had a huge season. He's probably in that list of guys you're talking about. And Rick, I want to talk about your sleeper real quick. Clark Phillips, the third.
I love Clark.
Thank you.
Utah. 5'9", 184, rate of 4.51. So I think we were higher on him during the fall, and then the measurements started coming in, and he wasn't maybe quite as fast as we hoped. Where are you on Clark?
I think he's going to be a starting nickel. I don't know if he's going to be able to line up outside with that speed, but this kid is one of the most competitive kids that I saw on tape. I know he's undersized. I know he didn't run fast, but he knows how to play football. And for a smaller corner, this guy has some unique ball skills. I mean, he gets his hands on a lot of balls. So with the way the offenses are in the NFL right now, and probably 70% of the time they're in some kind of 3-wide package. So I would consider this kid almost as a Nick starter. And I think he'll step in and play right away because of his instincts, because I think he is aggressive enough in run support. And I think he's twitchy enough to be able to mirror versus underneath coverage versus those slot receivers. Did you ever hear of him, B-Mac? Was that a sleeper, or do you know about him?
Well, I know about all these guys, by the way. And number 2, I wouldn't necessarily say he's a sleeper, but he's not getting the first round notoriety that some of these other guys are getting because he didn't run 4.4, he didn't run 4.3. I mean, He's faster than 4.5 based on what I've watched. And I just love his instincts. He's a natural cornerback. It seems like he's been playing cornerback his entire life, the way he's fluid in space. And I do believe he's a guy that can play inside or outside. He's shown that ability at Utah, and he's a guy who just competes. I love his techniques, and the issue for him, I think, for Clark, guys, is that this draft in regards to corners, there are so many long, tall guys. I mean, this is probably, and Ryan, you've been covering the draft for quite some time, and the same can be said for you, Rick. When you talk about the length at the
longer than Ryan,
position,
but go ahead.
No question. But when you talk about length, man, I can't recall seeing a draft with this many 6-footers at the cornerback position in quite some time. And that's kind of hurting Clark because he's 5'10", and he didn't really run a 40 time like some of these other taller guys have ran. So it's kind of pushed him back a little bit. But whatever team drafts him is going to get good value.
So he's actually,
you know how you know a good corner when they're born, they come out walking backwards. That's when you know you have a corner.
Born to backpedal, no question.
So Rick, let me ask you. I don't want to correct you, B-Mac, but Clark came in at 5'9". He's not even 5'10". So I got 2 questions for you. One question, one comment for you, Rick. So number 1, would you feel comfortable putting Clark outside at 5'9"? And number 2, his wingspan is 70 inches and 6/8. Compared that to our guy Juju, which is 82, almost 83 inches.
Yeah, no, I think he's a Nick corner all the way. I think he would have, and I agree with B-Mac, I think he's just a better football player than he is an athlete in the way he tested at the combine. And I just love his instincts. He just knows how to play the position. 5'9" guys nowadays with the size of the outside guys, I think they have some struggles. I don't think, unless they're very unique, the most unique small corner I was ever around that I thought was one of the best corners that I've ever had on a football team was Antoine Winfield Sr. That he can play, but he was small, but he can play outside. He played inside, and he'd hit the heck out of you. I mean, but I think nowadays, the way the game's evolved, the way the size of the receivers are on the outside, that this guy's a perfect nick. And he's going to play almost just as many snaps as a starter. So,
BMAC, before we get to the top 5, we'll take a quick break. But before that, I want to ask you about Kelee Ringo. Rick and I have talked him to death, the cornerback out of Georgia, almost 6'2", 207, ran a 4.36. Despite all those numbers, he didn't move at all after the combine. In fact, he started to slip a little more. He was first-round conversation, top 10 conversation during the fall. His game didn't match those expectations. Why does he continue to fall?
He's stiff. That's the issue for Kelee. And Ryan, you remember I talked to you about this before his season was over. I felt like he's a better safety than anything. But just watching him throughout the year at Georgia, I'm like, as a corner, having straight line speed is great. That's a great thing to have. But being able to move, you know what I mean? Bend your knees and move, that's something that he struggles with. And that's where he lost a lot of stock when you talk about looking at the position drills from what we saw at the combine and pro days. And then when you watch Kelee, he doesn't seem to be a natural in his pedal. He doesn't seem to be a natural in his space, opening up. His hips are stiff. He plays a little too high from time to time, and that will get exposed consistently on the next level. I love the athleticism. 6'2", over 200 pounds, 4'3". That's great. But then when you turn on the tape and watch him, especially watch him individually in shorts, you're like, wait a minute. He's not as polished as you would like him to be, especially having the first-round consideration that he had throughout his career in Athens. Now, if there's a coach that can get him to hone into his skills, to become better in his fundamentals, play with low pad level, I think he can be exceptionally well a gifted corner. But because of the stiffness, I think you put him in space. You put him in a post. You know what I mean? You allow him to use his God-given ability with his speed to be able to go sideline to sideline, hash to hash. But if you're taking him in the first round, you better have a staff, a defensive back staff that can get him to be lower, to be more fluid with his hips. Because if he's not able to improve that skill set, it's going to be a tough task being able to cover some of those small, quick, fast, big receivers that he will see Sunday in and Sunday out.
The 2 points to that, BMAC, is one, that coach better have a can of oil, because this guy is not going to get any looser. I think if you're ankle stiff, if you're stiff through, I don't think that's correctable with coaching. You can maybe try to lower his pad level, but to me, either you're stiff or you're not stiff. Like when people compared me to my brother wasn't stiff. I was stiff as a board. I mean, they invented when I ran down on kickoffs during training camp in my mesh jersey, because I couldn't even get a jersey for preseason games. They invented the net, so I wouldn't run out of the stadium. So the net that goes up in the back to catch they go, well, let's lower it because Rick's coming down on kickoff and he can't stop. So I just run right into the freaking net.
Like you laid it on an aircraft carrier.
And the other thing, if you're going to move to safety, one of the concerns and things we always talked about, we did it with Cam Bynum from Cal when we drafted him, a corner out of Cal 2 years ago, that we moved to safety. They have to be very instinctive, and they have to be able to communicate on the back end, and they have to be extremely intelligent. When we looked at all our analytics, the one thing that stuck out about safeties, they were the smartest guys on the defensive side of the ball besides middle linebackers, because they have to be able to identify and adjust coverages, and you know this. But intelligence was a critical factor on us determining whether a corner can actually move over to safety.
So I'm looking at the pro day results of over 1,000 players, and the cornerbacks is a long list too. Not surprisingly, Kelee Ringo's 3-cone, which measures your ability, your change of direction, your start stop, 7.21 seconds, and that doesn't mean anything until you compare it to the other cornerbacks, and it ranks about 50th just among everyone on the pro day circuit. Rick, I will give you one guess who is number 1. It's one of your favorite dudes. It has been for a while.
That's in stiffness?
No, who has the best 3-cone, who is the oiliest, if you will, the most fluid hips.
I think I know this one answer.
Go ahead, BMAC. He's got
Emmanuel Forbes.
BMAC, you're not going to believe when I tell you. Rick, this is your dude.
Riley Moss.
Riley Moss has the best 3-cone of anybody at the pro day who did a pro day, 6'6". So he's more than a half second faster than Kelee Ringo in his 3 coming.
Wow.
And
I almost threw him up there in the sleeper list because no one's talking about him either.
Pete wants to move to safety.
That would have been a good choice.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll go over our top 5, and we'll go through a little quicker here because we spent a lot of time on the pre-top 5, but that's all right. We'll talk cornerbacks right after this. All right, here's what we're going to do. And this is crazy, Rick, because we've talked to Leger Douzable about the interior defensive line. We talked to Josh Edwards about wide receivers. We talked to our guy Emery Hunt about the running backs. And by the way, BMAX had a bone to pick with Emery Hunt because he has the same grade on Anthony Richardson as he does on Bryce Young. Is that right?
Bryce and CJ, he gave Anthony Richardson the same grade as Bryce and CJ. Can we get him on this podcast, please? Can we do a 4-box?
Usually people after we're on and I after an hour with me, no one ever comes back. Pete refuses to come back on. Leger came on twice, but I think he's done now. Rick, Mac, I'm asking you, have some thick skin. You were a corner. If you get beat, just come back.
I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to come back and figure out what Emery is looking at to give Anthony the same grade as CJ and Bryce based on what they've done playing college football. Help me understand that.
So I don't want to get too far down this road, Rick, but I'll ask you for your quick answer. If you're in the draft room and this conversation comes up and you talk about that everyone has to be respectful, what are you saying to Emery when he says something like that?
I appreciate, wait, where's my sign I do with you? I appreciate all the hard work and energy that you put into this.
You ain't saying that to him if he said that in the draft room. Are you going to pull him aside and say, listen, man, you got to quit talking like that?
I like that because that'll create a conversation in the draft room. And
we're having Emery on tomorrow, so we're going to ask him about it. And BMAC, I don't know what your schedule is tomorrow. You can coordinate with Debo if you want to come on for 5 minutes to give Emery the business, but we would love to have you have Emery explain to you your concerns. So anyway, top 5 cornerbacks. And my point when I mentioned all the guys that have been on to talk about all the different positions is that we've had variations in what people believe. And we had Pete Prisco on as well to talk offensive line and tight ends. This list of the top 5 corners, person to person, all 3 of us agreed with the list. So I'll just go through the list, the top 5, I'll work from the 5 and work to the number 1, and then we'll talk about a couple so we can make sure we get these safeties as well. And BMAC, you just mentioned Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. 6 feet, almost 6'1", 166, but ran into the 4.3s. And Rick talked about him in the fall, about his ball skills. And BMAC, give me the stat you gave us last week on Network about Emmanuel Forbes. You remember it?
Yes, I do remember it. All right. In 3 years at Mississippi State, 6 pick sixes. I mean, he's caught 6 and he's returned 6 for touchdowns. In 3 years, a total of 18 interceptions. This is a guy who's always around the football, and I can care less about him being 166. He played at a high level in the SEC, played against top-tier like talent at the wide receiver position. And since day one, he jumped on campus. He created turnovers. He left creating turnovers. That's just who he is.
Rick, is there anything analytics that you guys learned about ball skills in terms of interceptions in college transferring to the league?
Yeah, I learned it from, to be honest with you, from Nick Saban and defensive back play. And the one thing he emphasized was ball skills. And Coach Zimmer did the same thing. Every one of the defensive coaches I've been around emphasized ball skills because you can be in position, but if you can't locate the ball, they're still catching the ball on you. But you have to have, whether that's instinctual, I don't know if you can train that better. I think it's a little more instinctual. You can be in great position, but if you can't find the ball in the air, then you're going to have issues. This kid, Forbes, can find the ball in the air. He looks like a receiver when he goes up and gets the ball. And I love this kid in the fall. I didn't know. I saw him play live against Alabama. When I saw his legs, I was like, this guy is a stick figure. But he doesn't play like that. And even for 166 pounds, he'll throw his bag of bones in any pile. He's not afraid to come up and run support. But he is just naturally instinctive corner that knows how to find the ball in the air. And I really
think, Rick, would you take him in the first round?
Yes. You know who this kid reminded me of, B-Mac? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. But when I was down in Miami, Sam Madison. Sam was a skinny corner, but Sam had really good ball skills. We had Madison and Surtain.
Surtain.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you have a comp, B-Mac? I thought you had a comp for Emmanuel Forbes too. Did you?
Yeah, Fred Smoot.
Yeah.
That's Freddie.
Yeah, had Fred Smoot, who also went to Mississippi State as well. Remember, he wasn't as skinny as Emmanuel, but he was a light guy, played with a lot of confidence, similar to Emmanuel Forbes, a very, very technique sound guy, and just competed, just really loved to compete. And that's who Emmanuel Forbes is as well. And I'm right there with you. I think he will go in the first round. Just running that 4.35 was something he needed to do, being that light. So if you're going to be that light, you better be fast.
And add in the ball skills, which not a lot of cornerbacks have, and that's why they're, I don't want to be disrespectful to you, B-Mac, but that's a lot of times why you're playing cornerback.
It's the truth, no question. The guys that have great ball skills, they get paid big dollars. It's the same for guys who can get sacks. If you can get sacks, you're gonna get paid. If you can get turnovers, you're gonna get paid. And that's who he is. Creating turnovers becomes a habit. Either you create that habit or you build on that habit. He's been able to do both.
Yeah, I think first round is a real possibility. I've heard that he's, and maybe you said the same thing, Rick, but he's moving on up the board. At 4, all three of us, have Deonte Banks out of Maryland. In the fall, I was focused on his teammate Ja'Cory Bennett, who plays on the other side, who had a really good season. But Tay, as he goes by, Tay Banks, I think he did himself a lot of favors. And Rick, we've talked him for months now as a first rounder, and I'm guessing if you like Emmanuel Forbes in the first round, B-Mac, you also like Tay Banks in the first round.
No question. He's going first in my mock. I can't tell you what team. I will allow you guys to see that on Monday. But Banks is a baller. He plays with a lot of swag. I love that he wants to tackle as well. The thing about cornerbacks, and Rick, studying the position as for long as you've done as a GM, there are a lot of corners that tackle because they have to. Then you have some corners that tackle because they want to. He's one of those want-to type guys in regards to tackling. And just his skill set. You talked about in the beginning of the season, yes, Bennett was getting all the attention coming into the season for Maryland in the secondary. But then when you turn on the tape, Banks continued to flash. He continued to be where he needed to be. Consistency, locating the football in the hip pocket of every wide receiver he was covering. And then when he went to the combine, wow, 6 foot, almost 200 pounds, ran 4.3. Jumped well, looked good in his drills. That was the stamp of approval he needed to get. And because of that, he will hear his name called in the first round.
And some corners don't want to tackle, will refuse to tackle, and aren't willing to tackle. So this dude is the exact opposite of that. It's just I had a tough time trying to make some pro comparisons with these corners. And this may be way off base, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I put him similar to Xavier Howard when he came out.
Xavier, you know what's funny? Xavier ran slow somehow, which is you don't know to watch him play.
He didn't run as fast, but I thought they had some similarities.
My comp, based on the speed and just his body structure and how put together he is, I gave him Pat P.
Oh wow! Did you see that? You see that, Rick, at all?
Pat P was pretty unique. I don't know if he's going to be Pat P, but that's why Xavier Howard was a well-built corner too. Yeah, that I thought played a lot of man, and when he came out of Baylor and did a lot of good things. But,
so Xavier was 6 feet 201. He ran a 4.58 somehow, but he is long, 33 vertical. I think Tay's vertical is a little better than that, as PMAC was talking about here. But I think the size comparison fits. And if he plays anywhere close to Xavier Howard, that's a home run as well. Because Xavier was a second round pick, I believe, right?
Yeah, he won the second round.
All right, let's go to number 3 here. Joey Porter Jr. And Rick, let me ask you a question. Because Joey Porter Jr. checks every box. And, I've used this for different position players. But when you're building this player in the lab, this is what a cornerback in today's NFL looks like. He ran the 4.51 40, which he wasn't happy about. He ran it again and got 4.46 at the pro day. 6'2 and a half, 193, 34-inch arms, 80 and 7/8 wingspan, almost 81, so longer than Juju Brent's. But when you see at the combine and you see at the pro day, he didn't do the 3-cone or the short shuttle. What does that say to you?
I don't know. I don't want to discredit these kids because more and more, and I don't know if the agents are having influence on whether they're doing the shuttles or not.
Yeah.
So I don't want to discredit him for that, but you'd love to see his shuttles, because the one thing that I do see in him is at times on in-breaking routes, he has a tendency to drift a little bit instead of breaking with the receiver when they make that in cut or any type of that. But I love this kid's physicality. I love his press man ability. So I people are going to start knocking him down the draft here because of the 4.51 speed. But I think he's a unique physical corner, and he does get a little handsy, but they all are handsy when college, because college lets them get away with it, but they won't get away with it with the pros.
And it sounds like you're least concerned about the handsy part. If you can do everything else, you can fix the hands.
Yeah, you just put boxing gloves on them during practice. That's what I've seen all the DB coaches do.
Right.
They can't grab them.
So he won't name names, although he may have named names eventually by accident. We'll have to figure out who that player was. I think we know, BMAC. I'll tell you in a second. Unless Debo informs me that Rick told himself in a previous podcast and we just forgot about it. So let me ask you, BMAC, when you hear Rick say things like he drifts sometimes on in-breaking routes, what does that mean to you?
Just not as comfortable as covering in space. The thing about Joey Porter Jr., if you watch him a lot, he plays so much press technique, which is great. You know what I mean? But then that creates a comfort zone that you always go to. But you don't really see him play a lot in space in regards to off technique. And that's because I don't know exactly their defensive scheme there at Penn State, but you didn't see that a lot. I think for him, mastering one thing is always great, but you got to be able to focus on your weaknesses as well. And that was a similar concern I had with Okudah when he came out of Ohio State, not playing in a lot of space. You know what I mean? So when you get to the next level, you might play press technique 50% of the times. The other 50, you might be called to be off and playing in space. So you got to be able to utilize your eyes, have proper disciplined eyes, not to mention your pedal got to be sound, and your transition out of your pedal got to be sound. So athletically, he's a gifted guy, extremely athletic, but just not being comfortable doing one thing can make you look out of whack when you actually try to do it because you're not used to doing it. So that's why in regards to coaching, high school, collegiately, coaches need to emphasize things that kids they're not used to doing. Because if they have any aspirations of getting to Sunday, by the time you get to Sunday, coaches don't hone in on fundamentals as much as you think they do, because they're trying to get the game prep ready. They're trying to go ahead and make sure everybody knows exactly what they need to do. By the time you get to Sunday, Rick, you know about this, they expect you to know how to do certain things already and do them well. And if you don't, you got to utilize your personal time to improve on that skill set. So that might be the one concern I have in regards to Joey Porter Jr., just being able to get comfortable doing something that he didn't do a lot at Penn State because of what their scheme called him to do. But if you factor in the length, the measurables, the competitive nature he displays, I mean, he gets in the right system. He's going to do numbers. You know who he reminds me of, and I like to go back in time and give guys flowers that we don't usually talk about anymore. Dale Carter.
Oh man.
That's who he reminds me
Dale
of.
Carter can run, though.
Yeah. And
I can run.
And Porter can run also, you know what I mean? Because if you look at the tape, no one is getting behind him. Look at some of the guys he's covered, especially from Ohio State. No one is getting behind him, but his length, man, 34 for Kansas City. By the way, Rick, do you remember what school Dale Carter went to? College?
He went to I know he had some issues in college, so I can't remember if he bounced around a little bit. Was it a small school?
Tennessee.
Yeah, but didn't he go somewhere before there? He was always at Tennessee.
I think he was always at Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken.
That's one of BMAC's little party tricks. He can tell you where any player in human history went to college.
Not any player, but just a few.
Oh, don't sell yourself
corners.
short,
Yeah,
Tennessee.
He reminds me a lot of Dale Carter.
That's a good comparison. I was almost a little bit Xavier Rhodes like, and maybe Isaiah Oliver like, but because they're big physical guys and if these guys get their hands on a receiver at the line of scrimmage, they're not moving. And the one thing that I've learned from DB coaches was disrupt the route, because it disrupts the timing with the quarterback. So if you're in press and you get your hands on a receiver, that's disrupting the route. And we would watch two corners that were in press one would give a guy a free release, and one would press him at the line of scrimmage. And there was almost a 2 or 3 yard difference of the receiver getting upfield into his routes when you can disrupt the receiver at the line of scrimmage.
And I would imagine that's based, whether your decision is to do that or not, is based on the athleticism of the cornerback and the physicality and how much you trust him, right?
Well, a lot of it's technique. BMAC,
Okay.
I mean, they're not, Deion Sanders going to do that staggered stance and jam you, but these big physical corners, one advantage they have, if they stay square to the receiver and are able to get their hands on a receiver, really affects the timing with the quarterback, with the receiver getting upfield in the routes.
Our buddy Dominic the Blind leaves a comment on the live YouTube show. Rick must really respect BMAC. Hasn't made fun of him for his comp yet, like he does Ryan. LOL.
Well,
yeah,
BMAC played. I was a training camp Hall of Famer, and Ryan, you were.
I was a Division I baseball player, Rick. I've told you that before. Disrespected me. And as I told BMAC, I played second base. The shortstop on our team was the quarterback that threw touchdown passes to Mike Tomlin. You didn't know that fun fact, Rick.
Wow.
That's
drafted. A fun fact for sure.
He got drafted by the Padres. He came over there, and I'd never seen someone run a 4.4 in person. He was 5'10", he was about 165, and he could throw the ball 65 yards in the air easy. And I saw him run down the first baseline. I was like, oh, that's what a real athlete looks like. So that was a eye-opening moment for me. All right, let's go to number 2 again. We're all consensus on this. And this guy, we've all liked him in the fall, and his draft stock has risen. Devin Witherspoon, cornerback, Illinois, played on a really good Illinois defense with a lot of dudes didn't get drafted. Weighed 181 at the combine, I believe. Weighed 185 in recent days when he worked out and ran a 4.4. I don't know if that's official or not, but he plays fast. And any concerns about his weight, Debo? Because BMAC, because we know that he will absolutely run over people. He plays like he's a strong safety.
No concerns. The thing about Witherspoon, he's 185, but when you look at his body, he's well put together, extremely solid, ripped. You can tell he's in the weight room, putting in work, and he has a nice foundation as well. So that's what wowed a lot of people and surprised a lot of people during his pro day, because he worked out without his shirt on, and everybody got a chance to see exactly how well put together and solid he is. And then when you factor in what he actually ran, oh, man, I mean, you love everything about this kid. He is probably the most confident corner in the draft, and he's not afraid to tell you how good he is and what he will do to opposing receivers. And some people might not like that type of attitude, but if he's doing what he's supposed to do, whatever gets him going, allow him to get himself going. And when you talk about just being physical, I mean, he's the best tackling defensive back. Forget corner. He's the best tackling defensive back in the draft. The way he approaches laying the blow to an opposing ball carrier, man, I just don't know. I hope he don't get fined a lot, because he's the type of driver, he don't buckle his seatbelt. When he's in there, he's going, and he don't have any regard for his body or the person who he's hitting. That's the type of player he's a tone setter, point blank.
So I should mention, by the way, Deonte Banks, we like him going to the first round. I think Joey Porter goes in the first round. It doesn't slip there. So obviously Devin Witherspoon goes to the first round as well. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that since he ran, this dude may be the number 1 corner off the board. There's a lot of mixed reviews on which corner is going to come off between him and Gonzalez. And the reason I'm saying that is because of what BMAC just stated, is that this dude is a tone center, and it's hard to find a corner that will be a tone setter for your defense. Now, I'm not comparing him, but I mentioned him earlier. They're not the same size, different type players, but as a tone setter, Antoine Winfield Sr. would rack you, and this kid will rack you as well. So I had a tough time. I don't know, B-Mac, if you came up with a pro comparison, because it's hard to find corners that can cover in zone and man and then support the way he does. I had a real tough time finding a guy as complete as this player is.
For me, my comparison that I gave Witherspoon, just in regards to coverage, not overall DB comparison, but in coverage, he reminds me of Darius Slade in coverage.
Okay.
The way he covers. Clearly, Slade does not hit like Witherspoon. Like Witherspoon is Witherspoon is an old school. He's like a Jack Tatum type DB. That's the type of fire and anger he plays with in regards to tackling. But in coverage, if you watch him in his pedal, quick feet. Oh my goodness, his feet are so quick. His transition is so smooth. It just, bam, it happens. He's not thinking about it. You see no hesitation when he comes out of his pedal. And that tells me he's been working on it. He's been working on it. He's been working on it. It's like second nature. It's like walking left, right, left, right, left, right. That's how he is in space. And the same can be said at the line of scrimmage. So just coverage wise, he reminds me a lot of a big play Slay. You talk about his transition, how smooth it is. But in regards to just tackling, I couldn't find a comp for him because the game has changed so much. If you want to find someone that tackles like Witherspoon, you got to go back years ago. Probably the closest corner would be Antoine Winfield Sr.
Yeah, that's the only comparison I was able to make from a tackling standpoint. And don't forget, this guy does have ball skills. I saw the 2 interceptions in the Northwestern game. So this guy, he's one of the most, if not the most complete corner in this year's draft.
Hey, Rick, let me ask you, do you guys have conversations about players that maybe talk too much smack, or you don't care about that if they're good football players?
If they're a corner that talks smack, that's they get a plus.
Okay.
Because
why is that, Rick? Why would you give them a plus?
If they get beat, they're more than likely going to come back the next play and try to choke the guy out at the line of scrimmage. Because they're so competitive. But they're the type of corners that if they do get beat, it doesn't carry on for 4 or 5 more plays.
All right.
That's the one thing about corners. And we try to measure that in our analytics with all the testing that we did, is that dudes that had a short-term memory that got beat, let's say they got beat on a touchdown, he was coming back the next play and going to fight you. This kid does that.
Yeah.
I mean, if he gets beat, he don't care. He'll say, let's go, let's put the ball out there, let's go again. He's not going to back down from anybody.
Rick, that's why you love competitors.
That have all the skill set, but it affects them mentally when they get beat and they can't get back to where they're not affected by getting beat. Those are the corners that actually end up failing, in my opinion.
All right, I'm going to ask you both this question, and just give me a short answer so we can get to number 1 here. If you're sitting there at 7 and you're the Las Vegas Raiders and you're not trading out, and Devin Witherspoon's sitting there and you have huge needs, are you taking him at least at that high? Is that too high to take Devin Witherspoon?
No.
Rick? No. B-Mac?
I agree. It's not
He'll
that
be in
high.
the top 10. I'll bet anyone $1 he'll go in the top 10.
By the way, you're losing dollars, so you might want to be careful. Okay.
He's already in debt. Rick is already in debt.
All right. So look, I agree with you guys. I think he'd go top 10, and I agree with what you guys have said about the way this young man plays. There's a young man for you. But let me ask you this, B-Mac, because number 1, consensus, Christian Gonzalez. Why is Christian Gonzalez, how is he better than Devin Witherspoon based on what you just explained to me?
It's about the measurables.
Oh.
6'2", 4'3". Ball skills.
6'2", 4'3".
Yeah. It's like one thing about the game of football and basketball. When you have a big guy that can do little guy things, that means something. And nowadays, when you look at these wide receivers, not saying that because you're shorter, you would be a liability, but when you covering 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and you 5'9", you 5'10", you 6 foot, I mean, it could be an issue. But we don't usually see a lot of guys be the height of 6'1", 6'2", running 4'3", and they're fluid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Christian Gonzalez, we talked about Kelee Ringo and some of the stiffness and concerns with that, the movement in space, playing a little too high from time to time. He's 6'2", but he ran 4'3", right? But his bend, the way he moves in space, is not what you would like to see at a cornerback. And then, of course, because of his height, then some people may say, well, he's a 6'2" guy. This is a guy who moves like a little corner. The way he bends his knees, he plays with nice pad level. You would think he's 5'10".
And by the way, B-Mac, his vertical, 41.5 inches.
Yeah, so it's a personal preference at the end of the day. I think either guy could be the first corner to come off the board.
So,
but
Rick,
if you're telling me you got one corner, 6'2", ran 4.3. You got another corner, 6 foot, ran 4.3, and they both move just alike in drills. I mean, it's a toss-up, but that's why he's my number one. 6'2",
All right.
438, 41, got hot tape, looks good in his drills, does everything you want him to do, and he's an all-around coachable guy.
And by the way, BMAC and Pat P talked to Christian Gonzalez on the podcast, All Things Covered, so you can check that out. But Rick, I'm going to pose the same question to you again. If you're sitting there at 7 and you have the choice between Devin Witherspoon, who plays with an edge and is not afraid to flap his gums, and you have Christian Gonzalez sitting there as well, who are you taking?
That's something that will be discussed at length in a meeting, because I don't think you can go wrong with either guy. The only thing that I would say is that Gonzalez had, when he was at Colorado, people questioned if he had any ball skills, because I don't think he had any production. Then he goes and has the 4 interception, I believe, when he transfers to Oregon. So
right.
He checks that box. It's just the difference is he is not as physical as Witherspoon. Witherspoon may be a more complete overall corner. So he may lean that way. That's why I think some teams have put Witherspoon ahead of Gonzalez, but Gonzalez is unique as well. He's just not as physical. He'll tackle. He's not you don't have to shame him in the tackling. I think he's willing enough to tackle.
Just shame him.
Witherspoon, you don't have to shame him to do anything. He'd go tackle his grandmother if he has a chance.
No question.
What you're saying, BMAC? You'd rather say
whoa than sick him.
There it is.
I'd rather say whoa than sick him.
And that's Devin Witherspoon all day.
No question. You got to tell him, whoa. You got to calm down a little bit. Those are the problems you want, though. You want those problems.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. And Rick, we're going to let you go a little early because Rick's got some things he's got to take care of. And
he's too busy for us, right?
He is way too busy for us. And then BMAC and I'll run through these safeties real quick, and I'll let you know how that goes. Because I'm going to change all your picks so it makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about, Rick, because you're not going to be here to defend yourself.
That's perfect, because I'll re-listen to this podcast, and then I'll come back on, and we'll have a re-podcast to correct all the things you guys are going to say wrong over the next 20 minutes here.
But great news, Rick will be back tomorrow for Mock Draft Thursday with our guy Emery Hunt, and we're going to call him out on some things. Then, Rick, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll see you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good show.
BMAC, you get a with the first pick T-shirt from Debo. Every guest will get a with the first pick T-shirt. We didn't get.
Why is Ryan shaking his head?
Because you ain't getting no T-shirt. That's why. By the way, before we take the break quickly, Rick, All Things Covered, they have so much gear. It is crazy. Every time I see BMAC do a HQ hit, he's got a different sweatshirt on, a different golf shirt on. We have one shirt that we have to share.
We're just a small little podcast, just trying to muddle our way through this thing, just trying to get up with the All Things Covered podcast. Eventually we'll get there, Ryan. We just need to continue to work hard, and people need to respect everything that we do to get ready for this podcast.
All right, Debo, let's go to commercial. This is enough.
Take care, Rick.
A Paramount Plus subscription is now included with your Walmart Plus membership.
Tell the world what happens when they cross me.
For no additional cost, members get a mountain of entertainment.
Are you accusing me of something?
This is great.
Sign up for a Walmart Plus membership and watch all of this and more with your Paramount Plus subscription.
I'm gonna trust you on this.
All right, B-Mac, just me and you now. We're going to talk little safeties here, and I'll talk about our safety sleepers real quick. My guy was Jordan Howden out of Minnesota, and I know teams like him a lot. Not much talk about him in the media, but he has a chance to get drafted pretty early on day 3, I think. He ran a 4.49, which gets your attention. Rick's guy was DeMarco Hellens out of Alabama. He's keeping true to his Bama pride there. And let's talk about your guy, Chris Smith out of Georgia, because he is a fun dude. And Kelee Ringo didn't have the season he wants, perhaps, but I feel like Chris Smith did a lot of things to help himself.
No question, man. Chris Smith, the issue for him, he's not as athletic in regards to speed as some of his peers.
4.62.
He's a football player, man.
Mm-hmm.
He's a football player. He communicates extremely well in the back end. He has a physical style. He tackles. He understands angles. He's where he needs to be, regardless of the lack of speed that you would like him to have. I mean, he's a pure football player. And I see his name getting called anywhere probably in day 3 to day 4. But whoever gets Chris Smith, they're getting a big-time football player who communicates and he knows the game of football.
And he played a lot of deep safety too, even though that 4.62 speed. And before I knew what he ran at the combine, I had him as like a late fourth, early fifth. Mm-hmm. And I know the 4.62 sticks out. But to your point, you watch him play, my man's making plays. And I'll give you Rick's notes on him because Rick talked about this before. He was at the Senior Bowl. Undersized, but better player than athlete. He's super smart, relies on smarts and savvy, good ball skills. He can struggle downfield when isolated sometimes, but that's not uncommon for safeties. And he had a good year. So basically all the things you talked about there that showed up on tape. But I think, he's a football player. Golly, who was the safety that came out of Ohio State and got drafted by the Rams a few years ago? And they made him a starter right away because he was so smart. He didn't test well. I have to check his name real quick. But just an example of a guy, just because you're not a first-round pick or even a day 2 pick, it doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to have success in the NFL early if you are smart and play a position where you need to be smart. Jordan Fuller is who I'm thinking about. B-Mac. Yeah. And that dude was smart as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a similar type situation for Chris Smith when he gets drafted. All right, let's talk about these safety rankings here. These are all aggregate rankings. Guys that B-Mac turned in his top 5 guys. Me and Rick did the same, and then Debo added them up, and we'll go that way. So we had a 3-way tie for number 5. Jair Brown out of Penn State. He ran a 4.58. I think that was his best time when he ran it as pro day. So the speed thing, that'll be a question, just like we said with Chris Smith. Quay Martin, he played mostly in the slot at Illinois alongside Devin Witherspoon and Sidney Brown, the safety out of Illinois. That dude can ball. I love Quay Martin, and he feels more like a slot corner to me, but I know sometimes we put these nicks, as Rick calls them, in the safety conversation. And then J.L. Skinner out of Boise State. I want to ask you about J.L. Skinner because he's my number 3, and he didn't like to tackle B-Mac, and that's a concern coming downhill. Like, he plays in the slot. He can play a little deep. He'll play close to the line of scrimmage. He's versatile. But when you have a safety that sometimes looks like he ain't even having a conversation with himself about tackling, that's a problem for me. Did you see that? Because I know you liked him a little bit.
I love his length, his size. He has real good ball skills. And you talked about tackling. One thing that I noticed about him, if you don't see him, he's coming. And sometimes when the ball carrier sees him, you see a sense of hesitation just a little bit. I need you to put your foot on the gas.
Right.
By any means necessary. The same gas that you're utilizing when the ball carrier don't see you, use the same gas when they see you. Now, granted, you got to break down because you don't want to just get shook out of your shoes, but just no hesitation. And sometimes you see a small glimpse of hesitation here or there. But if he goes into the right system, similar to what we're seeing right now, he reminds me of Jaron Kearse from Dallas.
Yeah.
Remember, got drafted by Rick to Minnesota, didn't really work out as well for both sides. He goes to Dallas. They found the proper way to utilize what he does best. And now he's become a big-time contributor for their defense in blitz concepts, in coverage, utilizing him in post, in the box. And I think Skinner can have the same type of production if he goes into the right system.
No, I think that's right. And that's a great point that you made about tackling, because I remember texting a scout last year about Kyrie Elam, who didn't like to tackle in the run support. And I said, what's going on here? He said, sometimes guys don't trust themselves as tacklers. Like, they can be great in terms of being physical downfield in the route, but they don't trust themselves as tacklers in the run support. And that doesn't mean that they don't want to do it, that sometimes you just don't have that confidence. Yeah. And as you know, B-Mac, confidence is a big part of playing defensive back.
No question. No question.
All right, let's talk about you, dude. Jamie Robinson out of Florida State. Ran a 4.59, 5'10" and 6'8", almost 5'11", 194. Played a lot of 2 deep. Can play a little slot. What do you think? What do you think about Jamie? He's number 4 on our list.
I love his game. I love Jamie's game. He got better throughout his time in Tallahassee. He improved. Heck, if I'm not mistaken, his teammates voted him Senior Bowl MVP during the week of prep, right?
Oh, I'll double check. I didn't.
Yeah, I think he got voted MVP. The award, I guess, the teammates voted on for the guy who had the best week during the Senior Bowl. I think he received that award. He tackles well, is very, very versatile, plays faster than what his 40 time says, and he's an undersized guy compared to some of these other guys, but he plays bigger than his measurables. I would just love to see him improve on his ball skills. Go ahead.
Practice player of the week. You're right. Senior Bowl.
Yeah. So, I mean, he communicates. He knows the game. He reminds me a lot in just regards of just knowing the game, a little bit of Tyrann Mathieu. You know what I mean? Just a guy who his above the shoulder game is really impressive. And he might not be the 6 foot, 6'2", 6'3" guy who's running a 4.4, 4.3 at the safety position, but he still can give you the same type production.
And Tyrann didn't run fast either. Tyrann ran 4.5.
Yeah,
he did okay. He may have improved on that number. All right, number 3 on our list. I just mentioned him, Sidney Brown. Saw it off is how Rick likes to describe shorter players. But you watch Sidney Brown play, and he's better closer to the line of scrimmage than deep. But he ran to the 4.4s, and I didn't know if he was going to run that fast just because he plays safety. But you talk about his teammate Devin Witherspoon popping people. Sidney Brown will pop you too, and he pops tight ends, and he will come downhill. He will set the edge if you need him to set the edge. The only issue is he's shorter. He's on the shorter side. But, man, the way he plays, I got what's his name? Hufanga, the 49ers crazy guy.
I
get Hufanga vibes. Hufanga's a little bigger, but I think Sidney Brown has a chance to be a better player.
Yo, I got the perfect NFL comp for Sidney Brown.
Let's hear it.
Bob Sanders.
Oh, Bob Sanders.
Sanders. A compact safety, loves to be around the box, no hesitation. He sees ball, he's going to get it, and he has no care for his body. No care for his body. And you talk about a guy that can saw that opposite leg off. That's what they used to talk about in regards to tackling as defenders and guys in the secondary. Coach used to emphasize, I need to have DBs that don't mind sawing that opposite leg off. Because if you go attack the opposite leg, you're not going to miss the tackle.
Gotcha.
Don't focus on the nearest leg to you. Try to go get the opposite leg, the furthest leg away from you, because you won't miss a tackle.
Right.
And that's who he is. He will saw that opposite leg all the way off of any ball carrier. And he gives me some Bob Sanders vibes.
That's for real. And I don't know if it was you, B-Mac, or someone that played during Bob Sanders' time, because it was a short time, because as you mentioned, he was small and he threw his body around and his injuries caught up with him. But I remember someone saying that was one of the best players they ever faced.
Man, Bob Sanders was real. It was he was the tone setter for that defense.
You know how good he was? He was a second round pick, and he was I think he was the last holdout of that. I think 2004 is when he was drafted. I think a year before you came out.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was the last guy to sign, because I think he must have wanted first round money. But back then, that was before the CBA, where everything was slotted. But he was a second round pick that held out, the last dude to not sign his contract. And if he were able to stay healthy, you would imagine he would have found his way to the Hall of Fame, because he was a game changer. All right, let's talk about Antonio Johnson, Texas A&M safety. And I'm sort of surprised. I thought he had first-round talent, and I had a couple teams say, yeah, he's not going to be in the first round. I still don't understand why. 6'2", 198. He can play in the slot. He can play deep. He can play middle of the field if you want him to, sort of an off-ball position, and he likes to hit people as well. 4.52, which is plenty fast for that position, I feel like. Why aren't we talking more about Antonio Johnson?
Well, number one, safeties don't usually go in the first round. They're kind of devalued in regards to first round recognition. And number two, if there is a safety to go in the first round, it probably will only be one guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the safest thing to say in regards to any draft, right? Name me the last time we had a draft where two safeties went in the first round.
I can't off the top of my head.
I mean, we got to do our research, but off the top of my head, I can't either. I can't either. So I think that's going to knock a guy like Antonio Johnson, but I do see him going in the second round. Rangy guy, plays with a toughness that you want your safety to have. He reminds me, and I think he's more athletic than this guy, but he reminds me of Kyle Duggar a little bit.
Oh, you think he's more athletic than Duggar?
I think so.
Pretty good athlete.
Yeah, and Duggar was a real good athlete. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he reminds me a lot of Duggar. And the thing about Duggar that I like, the versatility, being that with that size, you can do a lot with him. And clearly the Patriots are doing so with him. And I think Antonio Johnson has the same vibes as well.
All right. So one last guy on the list. Oh, you know what? Last year, Dax Hill and Lewis Cine went in the first round. Dax Hill's more of a slot guy, so I don't know if we want to count him solely as a safety.
Yeah.
But I guess officially that would be last year. But that's a little different. I don't think that counts. 06, according to Tebow, we had Huff and Whitner in the first round. Pick 7 and 8. Whitner. What was Huff's first name? Because he was longer.
Michael
Huff. Yeah, I think Whitner had a better career. But that's sort of when you started having the move to those athletic safeties that you could be a little versatile with. Michael Huff. Dante Whitner was more old school. All right, our number one guy, speaking of versatile, Brian Branch, plays mostly slot. He can play a little deep if you need him to. Blitz off the edge out of Alabama. He ran a 4.58 BMAC. He played way faster than that. You concerned at all about that 4.58?
No. He plays faster than the 4.58. Extremely smart, versatility, Swiss Army knife or whatever defense gets their hands on him. Reminds me a lot of C.J. Gardner-Johnson for the Eagles from a year ago.
That's the one that Rick came up with. And Rick also sort of hinted around Minka. Minka's taller. Minka played cornerback in college. But Minka has that sort of versatility that you hope Brian Branch has in the pros in terms of where he lines up and doing those sorts of things. And I think he's the only first-round safety that we're going to see go. And
for sure, right now. I agree.
So let me ask you this. Let's say at 17, the Steelers let's say they get Joey Porter Jr., let's say they get an offensive tackle there. And then at 32, Brian Branch is sitting there. Would you take Brian Branch?
Wow. It depends on who else is sitting there as well.
Well, you know why I asked you that, B-Mac?
Why?
Because we're about to end this podcast, and then folks can go to YouTube and see us do a Steelers draft. Go through all 7 rounds. And maybe Brian Branch goes 17. Maybe he goes 32. But you got to go to the old YouTube and watch it there. But for now, B-Mac, I want to thank you for giving us some insights on the defensive backs, cornerbacks, safeties. 2-time Super Bowl champ, Bryant McFadden. Watch him on All Things Cover with his dude, his cousin. Guy who's going to wear number 20 for the Steelers, Pat Peterson.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, B-Mac.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, we'll be back Thursday, Mock Draft Thursday, talking with Emmy Hunt. In the meantime, thumbs up, like, subscribe, and all other stuff. See you tomorrow.